In the summer of 2006, the Institute of Texas Culture made history by becoming the first American institution to present a Bigfoot exhibit titled Bigfoot in Texas that took the subject matter seriously. The Institute of Texas Culture presented their argument that the existence of Bigfoot was real by using archival photos, giant footprints, casting, and video interviews with eyewitnesses that claim they saw the elusive creature. Many of these visitors, including myself, got the opportunity to examine their findings and listen to many lectures that were presented, from academic professionals presenting their scientific findings to Native American chiefs telling the public their oral history of the Sasquatch creatures that lived in the Texas woods. This exhibit is believed by many to be one of the museum's most visited and successful exhibit they had released. This exhibit was so profound that schools from around the United States wanted to visit the museum to see this fascinating exhibit. While the exhibit was a success, behind the scenes, those within the Institute of Texas Culture were a bit disappointed that the exhibit was not fully completed. Those in charge of historical research were trying to track down a Bigfoot case that would have shocked the city to its very core, but sadly were unsuccessful in the end. The case they wanted to promote in their exhibit was when a couple of Bigfoots terrorized the community of Kelly Air Force Base back in the 1970s. I am your host, Streetlight Historian, and today I will present to you a hidden historical event that caused Kelly Air Force Base to put out a curfew for fear of violent Bigfoots roaming Kelly Air Force Base in August of 1976. These creatures would eventually be dubbed by those living in Kelly during that time period as Kelly's Bigfoots. In August of 1976, the first eyewitness to report seeing a Bigfoot near Kelly Air Force Base was Mr. Ed Oliveri, who lived at the south side of Kelly Air Force Base. Mr. Oliveri stated that he was getting ready to go to work early one morning when his dog began barking excitedly in the backyard. Going outside to investigate, Mr. Oliveri said he was looking over at the back of his fence towards a wooded area along Quintana Road when a train whistle sounded from the nearby Missouri Pacific tracks. The animal must have been hiding or lying down because when the whistle blew, it started running. It looked like some kind of Bigfoot monster. It was about 7 feet tall, with short brown hair over its body. It was running on 2 legs like a man, but a little more awkwardly. Mr. Oliveri claimed that the dogs in the neighborhood have since stated howling late at night. The second eyewitness to have seen a Bigfoot creature was Mr. Oliveri's neighbor, Miss Rosa Medina, who used to live next door to Mr. Oliveri. Miss Medina claimed that she spotted a smaller animal which ran on 2 feet. Miss Medina said she was awakened by her dog barking. When she went to the window, she saw an animal sitting on her back step. She said she was too frightened of the animal to go out, so she tapped on the window. To her surprise, she said, the animal jumped on 2 feet and ran off. She described the beast as about 3 feet tall with brown fur. In addition to the sightings, Oliveri's sister, Yolanda, reported that the particularly devoured body of cat was found in the backyard last week. She said the jaw of the cat was found in their backyard had been twisted grotesquely. Mr. Oliveri said he thinks the creature may be a mother and its offsprings living in the Heavenly Wood area along Quintana Road. Mr. Oliveri said he has searched the area and has found some unusual looking footprints or tracks, but has been unable to sight the animal again. Members of the Oliveri family showed some of the tracks to a reporter and a photographer. Several prints appeared to be the size and shape of human footprints. Mr. Oliveri said he has contacted state wildlife officials about the creature and was told that someone would examine the prints. Meanwhile, a number of residents are afraid to go outside their homes at night. One stated, "I'm not going to come out here alone with those Bigfoot creatures roaming around these areas, especially if what they've done to the wildlife here." The community of Kelly Air Force Base was indeed terrorized by the creatures and soon put out a curfew in hopes of keeping people safe. The creatures were last reported being in late August of 1976 before all sightings stopped in early of September of 1976. In 2005, when the Institute of Texas Culture heard the story, they sent some of their researchers to investigate this Bigfoot case in hopes of documenting the sighting and present it at their new Bigfoot exhibit for the year 2006. Sadly, they could not find any witnesses from that event and decided that they would not present the case in their Bigfoot exhibit due to a few amount of evidence from that historical event. As previously mentioned in both the Converse Werewolf and Thunderbird episodes, I met a couple of veterans who had paranormal experiences while being stationed at San Antonio, Texas. One witness had a dogman encounter, while the other one had a Thunderbird encounter. This last witness had an encounter with one of Kelly's Bigfoots. Due to the nature of his job that he was still working in, he asked me to keep his identity anonymous as well. However, just like the other veterans, he wanted his account to be known to the public in hopes to inform the public had happened during the Bigfoot event near Kelly Air Force Base in 1976. The witness claimed that while driving to Kelly Air Force Base in the morning, he saw a 7-foot tall hairy creature crossing through the road and into the woods. He could not believe what he was seeing. The creature was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was 7 feet tall, was covered in hair, and looked like a female. When the eyewitness made it to Kelly Air Force Base, he asked the security guards at the gate if there was any ape on the loose, to which they responded no. However, they claimed that the U.S. Air Force security forces tried to capture a 7-foot tall hairy creature that was trying to break through one of the metal fences near Kelly Air Force Base runways. U.S. Air Force security forces tried to capture the creature, but it escaped into the woods before any of them could grab it. No one knew what they saw that day, and many of the military witnesses were informed to keep their encounter a secret and not notify the press of what just happened. A few days later, the eyewitness talked with his friend who worked as an intel officer. The eyewitness claims that while talking with his friend, he asked him if he knew anything about a giant ape on the loose in Kelly Air Force Base. To his shock, his friend revealed to him that what he saw was a genuine Bigfoot and not an ape. His friend explained to him that the United States military has received many reports of Bigfoots near military bases across the U.S. He also revealed that Kelly community was petrified of going outside because the creature had been reported to have been hostile. The eyewitness wanted to know what the military was going to do with this situation. His friend replied was shocking to say the least. His friend told him that the United States military was going to leave the creatures alone. The eyewitness asked his friend why the U.S. military was going to leave these creatures alone if the reports of them being hostile are true. His friend responded that since the 1960s up until 1976, the United States military has been keeping track of growing reports of humanoid cryptids that have been reported across San Antonio. His friend mentioned about the Donkey Lady attacks of the 1960s to the 1970s, reports of wolfmen still roaming Converse from the late 1960s and early 1970s, and recently the Thunderbirds attacks in the south side of San Antonio at Brooks Air Force Base in 1976. The eyewitness claimed that his friend told him, "How do you think the public would react if they learned that all these creatures not only existed, but also were able to penetrate military bases and have been known to be violently attacking humans?" The eyewitness responded, that probably with all those reports smashed together, the San Antonio public would panic and everything would go to chaos. To which his friend replied, "You are correct. That is why the United States government are keeping these reports isolated and unknown to the public." The eyewitness then asked his friend, "Why is there a rise of reports from the 1960s to 1976? His friend answered was that due to San Antonio's population growth and what the United States military was doing behind the scenes, it's very possible that these factors are the cause of the rise in reports of encounters with these mysterious cryptids. The eyewitness friend even claimed that these creatures have been here in San Antonio since Native Americans established these lands as their home. With the rise of deforestation and the secret government research that the US government was doing in San Antonio may in fact be correlated with the rise of these encounters. The best method that the US government found was that by leaving these creatures alone, the encounters would decrease and disappear from public thought. After speaking with his friend, the eyewitness agreed that he would keep his encounter and what he had learned from him a secret. His friend thanked him, and the eyewitness kept this information a secret for nearly 45 years. I asked the eyewitness why he decided to reveal this information out in the year 2020. His response was that his intel friend had recently passed away, and since the majority of San Antonians are unaware of what had transpired at Kelly in 1976, he believed that the surviving witness of the 1976 Bigfoot encounters at Kelly might find some closure with his account. He also believed that this part of San Antonio history should be known, since a majority of San Antonio history is not being taught to this very day. In 2021, many San Antonians are unaware of what has transpired at Kelly Air Force Base in 1976. If the reports from the eyewitnesses are indeed true, then it's very likely that San Antonio was home to a variety of cryptids. It is also possible that Kelly's Bigfoots were indeed real. Kelly's Bigfoots is probably one of the most shocking historical events to have happened at Kelly Air Force Base and was successfully hidden from the public. Many of the eyewitnesses have either moved out of San Antonio or have passed away. Hopefully, this video will shed some light or even some closure to the surviving witnesses of that historical event. As to where these creatures are now, we may truly never know, and maybe it might be best to leave these Bigfoots in peace.